Hey, good morning. All right. Today is January 26th. The year is 2026. Man, this weekend, we got a little bit of snow in the Midwest, but honestly, texting with some friends, specifically down in Nashville, Tennessee, we did not get the worst of it. So thankful for that and thinking about friends and families that we know down a little bit more south. So, hey, this is the first episode of the Jordan Guest Show. I guess we're calling it. And just a quick introduction about me, who I am. I I guess my main role at this point is I run a CPA firm. We've got 11 full time people in that firm. We service small business owners and high net worth individuals on just tax planning and then the regular accounting and tax stuff. We're going to get into a little bit of that today, specifically about how AI is playing a role in professional services. We could go a lot of different ways with that topic, but today I'll kind of talk through how we're thinking about AI and then how I'm also just seeing from a broader standpoint of how other firms are, you know, in I guess, connected with in different groups and such. The other couple of things that I would highlight about just who I am, just so um, big into Bitcoin and not crypto. If you hear that, and you kind of, a lot of people, I say, oh, I do some work with Bitcoiners, with Bitcoin businesses, Bitcoin startups. They hear that, and their head, immediately goes to crypto. We don't touch any crypto. Maybe crypto broadly, basically everything outside of Bitcoin will have a use case. To this point, the proof of work versus proof of stake. I'm living in the proof of work, side of that. And again, I'm sure people will come in the comments and say, I don't understand DeFi, don't understand Web3, but um, you know, there's the old adage of just keep it simple, stupid. And I ventured over into those worlds. I think every Bitcoiner has at some point. Most everyone has lost money and also left more confused than they came in. And whereas at this point, I've studied Bitcoin for so long, put so many hours into listening to different people speak on Bitcoin topics, and then been building in that space as well. Have a full grasp on it, and again, just makes sense to me. We'll get into some of those topics on why it makes sense. Just wanted to introduce that because it is a big piece of what I get into. So, second company that I'm devoted a good bit of my time to is a software company called Bitmint. It is a Bitcoin accounting and tax software. We built it because we were running into issues using, QuickBooks alongside some crypto tax softwares and thought, hey, why don't we have all of this in one place? So, maybe at some point we'll talk about that. Not really the topic of today. Um, yeah, we've gone to market with that and it's been great. The third venture, I guess, that I am devoted time to each and every week it's more of a media brand. It's called Bitcoin for Financial Services. Essentially, we saw a gap in the market where there wasn't enough high quality education about Bitcoin, why it's different from other cryptocurrencies, specifically targeting an audience of CPAs, which is the world I come from, but also financial advisors, attorneys, financial planners, just everyone in that world, and seeing how does it fit? How does Bitcoin potentially fit into my practice? Whether I'm accepting Bitcoin as payment, potentially paying some of my employees, contractors in Bitcoin, um, or I'm advising clients on how they might use Bitcoin. Of course, we're not salespeople. At the end of the day, we get questions about all kinds of things that we have to answer, or at least do research on, and come back with a good answer. And Bitcoin is a big part of that. And I just looked out and I saw, man, there's just not enough folks who really can answer some of these questions adequately. And especially if you have a fiduciary duty, um, to serve your clients in their best interest, it's essentially our viewpoint that you should learn about Bitcoin. And even if you come away with, all the knowledge and you still say, hey, this isn't something I'd recommend, it's too early in its adoption cycle, and that's totally fine. But I think the main thing is, um, you can't not have that knowledge about Bitcoin. And so we started that. We did a summit last October in 2025. That was our first in-person summit. Me and a gentleman named Wyatt O'Rourke. We worked together quite a bit, and then we've spun off out of that event, and we are doing a weekly podcast called Bitcoin for Financial Services that essentially interviews people in the space who are building Bitcoin into their practice, how they're doing that. We talk to people whether they're working in AI and they're servicing financial firms from the AI standpoint. Actually, we've got a guy named Mark. Marks, I guess he's better known for. He's coming on, I think, in February. I'm really excited for that conversation because obviously not a professional services, financial services guy, but is servicing a lot of those folks from the AI standpoint, which is relevant because that's actually what we're going to get into today. And then, this year we're having our second summit. So that's going to be in October, the 21st through the 23rd of this year in 26. And so, yeah, Wyatt and I are just building that. It's been really interesting to see the response from people who have watched those videos, who have joined our Signal group, and who are, essentially like, this is something new. This is interesting. Either I've been here for a while and I work at a Bitcoin company that does custody, or I've worked it into my wealth management firm. Another huge goal for us there is actually to bring more professionals in. So just want to give you kind of a quick background. I know this is the first video. And it's always funny. You're like, where do I start? Of course, I think if you're watching this video, you probably do know me at this point. You've got to build up a bit of the videos backlog before the YouTube algorithm starts to do its thing and push this to new audiences. But all that to say, you have to start somewhere. I've been doing YouTube and podcasts with Wyatt on that other side, and I wanted to have a dedicated channel that really was just my thoughts on what am I seeing out there. Because as my wife tells me, we're working on a lot of things, and that's all good stuff. But I always have to take a step back and say, hey, not everybody is working on these things and seeing exactly what we're seeing. So I wanted to try to jump on here. The cadence is going to be, I think, about 3 times a week. We've got a couple kids at home, so finding the time to do these, that's honestly the hardest part. Getting in front of the camera and talking about things, that's honestly easy. So just setting aside the time. So I would expect here at the beginning, we're going to be pushing out, 3 videos a week, and they're going to be, we're going to try to keep it to under 30 minutes each video because I know people are busy. Okay, so where do we want to start today? So I think the main thing that I want to start was doing a little bit of research and about AI fitting into accounting firms. And what I saw was AI adoption last year for the accounting industry. It jumped. It jumped from 9% to 41% in a single year. But you talk to people and you get a sense of, hey, what does your day to day, look like? Are you actually working less? And the answer is no. Vast majority of people that are working in finance or accounting they're still buried in a lot of manual work. They're using AI mainly as just a better search engine. And so today, what I wanted to just opine on a little bit is what we're seeing in the AI market, which is changing by the day, which I think is why doing these videos is actually really important, because you might be using a tool today, but then you find another tool a week from now and it totally changes your workflow. And so thinking through, hey, how does my team use this? How do I pull context over from a previous tool that I was going really in the weeds with and pull that into this new tool? And then the biggest topic, I think, from our standpoint on the CPA firm side is, hey, these tools are really, really powerful. but there's no getting around the fact that we deal with a lot of sensitive information. And so we have to use AI in a way that protects that information and essentially ensures that there's no exposed data, whether it is personal and identifiable information, their social security number, their address, their name. Of course, you can never do that. I mean, we have to keep all of that stuff private, as well as even conversations, thinking through, hey, I have all these conversations, and us on the CPA side, at least, I guess on the financial advising and financial planning side as well, you have insights about a person's life that maybe they haven't even shared with, their immediate family. And so we're trying to make sure that, okay, we want to leverage AI. We think that firms that don't leverage AI are going to go away, but we want to make sure we're also doing it in the correct manner. So I guess where I'll start, and I've gotten a really interesting view because we merged with a CPA firm in the past year called Satoshi Pacioli. Joe Wood, who runs that firm down in Nashville, they only work with Bitcoin businesses, Bitcoin individuals. They've kind of like really captured that niche market, and it's been really fun and interesting to see. And then it's been great to combine our teams and do more and more of that work, because prior to, I mean, I've been a Bitcoiner for about 5 years now, but I wasn't doing work with a whole lot of Bitcoin businesses. And now, we work with the Bitcoin businesses each and every day. So that's been really fun. But you meet a Bitcoiner, a specific type of Bitcoiner, and they've gone down maybe a bunch of rabbit holes. One of those rabbit holes is privacy. And there's this constant battle, I would say, between, hey, we need to be privacy first. We need to make sure that everything is locked down. And then the other side is, hey, we need to figure out what are the right tools. We need to be most efficient. We need to grow top line revenue. We need to grow the bottom line. And I would say at this point, I kind of sit in the middle there for our firm, trying to take the best of both of those sides and pull them in to, obviously a unified strategy for the firm. So, you know, they I would say part of the firm has been using a tool called Maple AI, and actually Mark's the gentleman who's coming on to the show in just a couple weeks. That's his company. So I'm really excited to hear more about how they're fitting in, you know, secure private AI into how financial services are doing their work day in and day out. But with any privacy focused tool, you get into it, and if you're comparing it to a cloud based LLM that has, tons and tons of money pushed behind it, there is a difference on what the UX looks like, and just how good the product is. There's no way around. When I first started with Joe and I was playing around with Maple, and then I would go back to ChatGPT, it was night and day, and that was probably, that was 6 months ago at this point. But the problem is, you get into one of these tools, it has a lot of context, and you kind of run with that. And so, I want to talk today, honestly, just what we've been looking at currently. I don't want to go too long today. I could talk about this stuff for quite a while because, frankly, I've been staying up a little bit too late, um, several nights a week, playing around with the different tools and seeing how it can fit into my workflows from business standpoint, from my personal digital life, and how can I essentially make things more efficient. So I guess all that to say, I think that the hype here is real. We have been working automation in with clients for a long time, whether it's taking them from QuickBooks Desktop and taking them to online and writing rules and doing some of that logic so that the books are put together much, much quicker. But as the business is more and more complex, you still run into headwinds, you run into mistakes. And even QuickBooks, I mean, I would say I don't live in QuickBooks all that much anymore just because, a lot of folks on the team kind of own that part of our firm, but I'm in it enough to see that they rolled out a huge update to their online product in the past year, and I wasn't super impressed. And also, you teach a CPA or a CPA teaches themselves how to use a tool, and then you come in and you completely change the tool. There's a difficult transition period there of like, just where is the button that used to be right here and now it's not here, or where's that drop down? And so that's just another big piece of this is the CPA firm world is still very old. We're transitioning. We're in the middle of a transition. A lot of guys and gals who are 65 years plus, they're trying to figure out ways to get out. And because of that, we've seen firms just turn over. And at least for my seat, I've seen a lot of firms get gobbled up by private equity or by larger firms. And ultimately, compliance departments balloon. And so you don't have the freedom or flexibility to potentially, work with clients on some unique situations to, of course, stay within the law, but not do everything ultra conservative and miss out on tax savings for a client. So that's one thing I've seen through the consolidation is just the compliance piece and clients being like, hey, I used to do things this way. And now this new firm is saying that they can't do it that way. Even if I make a good case or I've got a second opinion and I understand the risks of taking this position on the tax return. And then we can always, here's the documentation we put in place to address the IRS concerns if they ever ask them. So that's one piece. The other two pieces are just, especially on the PE side, they come in, they will double, triple prices, but then the client says, hey, I used to work with this person. I used to be able to text them, call them, go to their office, and then things just change, right? Now you're working with a much larger organization, and that human element that is so, such a value add within the CPA world specifically is sometimes lost. And so all of that to say, I think that the hype is very real. And we've seen some firms do this the right way, but I also think that there's so much left to do. And especially before we really hit that breakthrough moment for a CPA firm where, hey, we've been able to onboard more clients. We've been able to do that with, our core team. Like we haven't had to hire as aggressively as we would have had to if we were, implementing this growth strategy 2 years ago. So then our bottom line actually as a percentage grows. The last thing that I'm really passionate about with CPA firms is trying to grow the enterprise value multiple on their gross revenue. I think it's industry standard. My understanding, I've had a bunch of conversations about potentially purchasing firms and what's the valuation and all of that. And, one times annual revenue is essentially what I've seen out there in the market as the market price for a firm. And I think that there's good reason for that because if you go and you purchase a firm, they're working with a guy, they've been working with that guy for a little while, and now you're asking them to come over to your setup. That's a difficult ask. And so there's attrition there. There's people who leave. And so, and then there's just a lot of handoff meetings. It's very manual. Whereas, you go to the software side of the world, you go buy a SaaS product, you could buy that. You might pay 10 plus X on the top line annual recurring revenue because it's so much easier of a process to take that in, and you don't have to stay on as a quasi consultant for 3 years and help clients understand, hey, this is how they do it now, and I know we haven't done it like that before. So all I'd say, the CPA firm world, I think, is ripe for disruption with AI if you do it the right way. And the three main metrics that we would focus on is increasing capacity, so growing that top line revenue, keeping this a core team, maybe hiring one person for every 300 clients you bring on instead of one person for every 125 clients you bring on. So you grow capacity, and then you also can grow your bottom line by doing it with a lean team, making sure everyone still has a good work life balance, making sure the clients actually get in front of people when they need to, when they want to. So that increases top line, right? So you might take your CPA firm net margin from 10%, and maybe we're able to take it to 30% because of the added capacity and then putting the tools in place. And like I said, I think if you build a firm that's automated, where the client is still getting that handshake across the table, they're still able to sit down and talk about their situation, get their questions answered, but the back office piece of the puzzle is all solved um, by tools talking to each other, and then AI done the right way with client work, giving the team the insights that they need to get through work more quickly. I think that's extremely powerful. You just have to do it the right way. Because again, you can't just be feeding tax returns unredacted into a cloud-based LLM. It's just not allowed, and it's a huge security risk. And we have ethics standards that we live up to, and so we have to take those things extremely seriously. So yeah, so all that to say, I'll just give you a brief example of how this has happened in real life for us. So we, like a lot of firm leadership and people who work at the firm, we were using AI as a research tool. We were using it as a way to search, but that was kind of it. And the world now is, hey, these tools can, they can connect your different tools like your CRM, for example, and your email and your how clients text your firm. Those are just how you have internal communications. Like there are now AI tools out there. Claude Bot is kind of all of the big news and hype right now. If you haven't heard of that, it sounds like Claude, like the Anthropic Claude. It's actually spelled CLAWD bot, BOT. Um, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is really interesting. But I'm like digitally native, right? I'm 30 years old. I've always grown up with the internet. If I were to introduce this to a 55-year-old partner at a firm, they're going to say, interesting, but not how we do things. We've done things this way for the last 10, 20 years. And, we might make some changes at the margins, but we're not turning this whole thing upside down. And so that's just one example of, okay, there are tools out there, but do the practitioners, one, have the time to implement the change? Do they have the technical wherewithal to actually do it? And then even if they did, like I would say I do in my seat, but then do I have the bandwidth to actually implement these tools on top of all of the client work, all of the client meetings that still has to get done? So there is this transition period I think we're living through where, AI promised that you would actually be at your screen, be it your phone or your computer less. I would say we are in this world right now, and it's going to last for a little bit, where you're actually in front of your computer more because you're still having to live in the old world, and then you're trying to build ways to transition into the new world. And then you want to do that right, right? You want to see if, hey, there's a better tool. Now I need to port that all of this over to that new tool, right? I've got all this context here. I need to port that over. And then lastly, there's just a technical piece here where a lot of CPA firms, if they even have come into the future, they have been reliant upon infrastructure in the cloud, right? Whether that is, document management or the tax software they use, all the different softwares. And it's so funny. I'll talk to some of my software friends, and they're like, "How many tools you guys use in the firm?" And it's a lot of tools, right? And then you start trying to build automations, and you're using tools like N8N or Zapier, and those all rely upon APIs for each of those tools to talk to each other, and those break. It's not perfect. So I guess that gets back to really the true final point is you probably want to run all of this on a local machine, a powerful local machine that is like your hub for your firm. All the data lives there, or most all of the data lives there. And the other thing that lives there is a local LLM that's open source, that it can read a file, it can decipher what the file means, but it's doing all of that work actually on the machine. It's not sending that file to OpenAI or Anthropic, to their data center and having their machines do the computation. The computation, everything, the file, it lives on this machine. So I want to go further into that at some point. I know I've probably already, gone on a little bit too long, but I wanted to, I guess, just give a quick introduction. And the main points of this video are, I think that there are huge opportunities for CPA firms to really come into this world and improve their quality of life, improve the amount of money that they make, and also improve how many hours of their time it takes to make that money. One little teaser that I'll throw out there is, especially if you're a client and you're hearing this, or you're like, I work with a tax firm, you might be hearing this and you say, hey, this is all really interesting. I want to work with a firm like this, because what I'm really hearing you say is I should be getting a price break on my services, right? Because if you guys are able to do more more with less, essentially, doesn't that mean my price should come down? And the teaser I would leave with you is that is true. Essentially, AI should be forcing price deflation. And if you're a Bitcoiner and you've read a book like The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, you hear that and you're like, yes, I understand what Jordan's saying. If you hear that and you don't understand why tech should actually be sending prices very low, or at least over time, those prices in dollar terms should be coming down. Something to look into, because it is a paradox. We live in an inflationary environment, um, and you've got two worlds battling, right? You've got the tech boom and the AI boom, which is making things, in theory, I guess, or I would say over the next 3 to 5 years, for sure will play out, where you will see tons of innovation, you'll see tons of efficiency gains, and that should send prices lower. It should, right? You shouldn't be paying your CPA, you know, vastly more for them to do all of the tax prep planning work on software than someone had to pay someone to do all of this physically writing it on paper back in the 80s, right? But they do, and they have to in this current paradigm, which is, that's one battle is tech. The other paradigm is central banking, and there's just, it's built into our system that inflation has to run at least 2%. Obviously, right now it's running at closer to 3%, and in the past 5 years, it's run as hot as 9-10% on an annual basis. And so that's another just like big battle that is happening out in the world today. And if you haven't studied Bitcoin, that's one of the big reasons why you should, because the monetary network of Bitcoin is fixed in supply. And so it actually does support a tech forward and AI driven future much better than, a fiat money system that can be printed at will and has to be printed at will to cover the dollar denominated funded and unfunded liabilities. And so I'll leave you with that, because it's just something to think about. Really, the big idea there is, if everyone's able to do things much more efficiently, why do prices have to keep ticking up? And the reason for that is the whole underlying system is, well, you have employees, their rents are going up, their, maybe mortgage interest payments are going up, grocery prices generally have to trend up. And so if prices then come down for the firm, you hit a certain point where you have to lay people off, right? Um, so it only works if prices broadly actually are trending down. And that's a new paradigm. You talk to people and they get scared by that. So it's something we'll dig into on this show, but I wanted to kind of tease it out because it's a natural place to go from the conversation about AI. in a CPA firm. All right. I think that's all the time that I've got for this morning. I've got to get to the office, but I really appreciate you hopping on and watching this video. And if you have any questions, if you have a suggestion or comment, obviously feel free to leave that down below. And I think that this message is, an important one, or else I wouldn't be taking the time to do it. I've got a lot of other things I could be working on, and so, if you want to if you want to, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, that obviously helps with all of the ways to get this into the hands of more and more people and help them, specifically bring AI into their life. For this topic, obviously, there's other topics that we're going to go through, whether it's Bitcoin related or you know tax related or building startups. There's a lot of different directions that we could kind of take this. So excited to be doing it. Always like a good thing to get out into the community online and speak directly with people. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you and your family are staying warm and safe through all this crazy weather. And we will be back very soon.